He was kidnapped by pirates and laughed when they set his ransom, demanding they more than double the price. He conquered an entire region of Europe in less than a decade, bringing millions under the Roman eagle. He crossed a small, muddy river that changed the course of history forever. And on the Ides of March, 44 BC, he was stabbed 23 times by men he once called his closest friends. This is the story of Julius Caesar, general, politician, reformer, and eventually, the dictator whose ambition ended the 500-year-old Roman Republic. But was he a tyrant who dismantled democracy? Or was he a visionary who realized the Republic was already broken? So today, on the second episode of the Titans of History, from the MegaBrainShow, we are tracing the journey of the man who didn't just rule Rome. He became the blueprint for every emperor who followed. But before we start, please make sure to click that subscribe button. It really means a lot to the channel. Let's start our story in 100 BC. Caesar was born into the Julian clan, a noble patrician family that claimed they were descended from the goddess Venus herself. But in Rome, a fancy name didn't always mean power. When Caesar was a young man, the city was a powder keg. Two factions were at war: the Optimates, who represented the traditional elites, and the Populares, who looked to the common citizens for support. Caesar chose the latter. This choice nearly cost him his life. When the brutal dictator Sulla seized power, he demanded Caesar divorce his wife, Cornelia. Caesar refused. He was stripped of his inheritance and forced into hiding. He survived by the skin of his teeth, but he learned a cold lesson. In Rome, if you don't have power, you are nothing. In 75 BC, a young Caesar was traveling across the Aegean Sea to study oratory when he was captured by Cilician pirates near Pharmacusa. These weren't the romanticized pirates of fiction. They were the brutal, undisputed masters of the Mediterranean. They demanded 20 talents of silver for his release. Caesar laughed in their faces. He told them that for a man of his stature, 20 was an insult. He insisted they demand at least 50. For 38 days, the power dynamic of the camp was inverted. Caesar didn't act like a prisoner. He acted like their commander. He wrote poetry and speeches, demanding the pirates sit and listen to him. If they didn't praise his work, he called them illiterate barbarian. When he wanted to sleep, he sent a servant to tell the pirates to be quiet. He even joined in their athletic games, all while jokingly telling them that once he was free, he would return with an army and crucify every last one of them. The pirates thought he was a charming, eccentric fool. They were wrong. Once the ransom was paid and he was released at Miletus, Caesar immediately raised a private fleet. He hunted them down, captured them in their lair, and recovered his 50 talents. To show he was a man of mercy, he had their throats slit before crucifying them, just as he had promised. It was a preview of the Caesar the world would come to fear, a man whose charm was only matched by his absolute, cold-blooded resolve. Back in Rome, Caesar began his climb up the cursus honorum. He spent money he didn't have on massive public games and festivals, plunging himself into debt to buy the loyalty of the mob. By 60 BC, he formed the first triumvirate, an unholy alliance with Pompey, Rome's greatest general, and Crassus, its richest man. Together, they held the Republic in their hands. But Caesar needed military glory of his own. In 58 BC, he secured the governorship of Gaul. From 58 to 50 BC, Caesar led his legions on a campaign of conquest that pushed the Roman border all the way to the Atlantic. But his greatest challenge came in 52 BC at the siege of Alesia. The Gallic tribes had finally united under a brilliant leader named Vercingetorix. Caesar trapped the Gauls inside the hilltop city of Alesia, but he knew a massive relief army of 250,000 Gauls was coming to attack him from behind. Caesar's solution was a feat of mega-brain engineering. He didn't just build a wall, he built two. The first, the circumvallation, was 11 miles long and designed to keep Vercingetorix in. The second, the contravallation, faced outward to protect the Romans from the relief army. Between these walls, Caesar's men lived in a giant donut of fortifications. They dug deep trenches filled with water, planted lilies, hidden pits with sharpened stakes, and scattered crow's feet to hobble horses. When the two Gallic forces attacked simultaneously, the Romans were outnumbered 4-1, fighting in both directions at once. Through sheer discipline and Caesar's personal presence on the battlefield and his iconic red cloak, the lines held. Vercingetorix surrendered, and Gaul was won. Caesar sent his journals back to Rome, making him a living legend. But his success terrified the Senate. They ordered him to disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. Caesar knew that to return without his legions was suicide. On a cold January night in 49 BC, he stood on the banks of the Rubicon, the small river that marked the boundary of his authority. To cross it with an army was an act of high treason. He reportedly paused, looked at his men, and uttered the famous words, "Alea iacta est." The die is cast. Civil war had begun. The war spanned the entire Mediterranean. Caesar defeated Pompey's forces in Spain, then pursued Pompey himself to Greece, where he crushed him at the Battle of Pharsalus. Pompey fled to Egypt, where he was murdered. When Caesar arrived, he met Cleopatra, forming a legendary alliance that solidified his control over the East. When he finally returned to Rome, there was no one left to stop him. In 44 BC, he was named Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. While he was a master of war, Caesar was also a master of logic. One of his most enduring legacies wasn't a battle, but the calendar. Before Caesar, the Roman lunar calendar was a mess. It was only 355 days long, and politicians often added intercalary months just to keep their friends in office longer or shorten their enemies' terms. By Caesar's time, the calendar was so far out of sync that the harvest festivals were happening in the winter. Using the astronomical knowledge he gained in Egypt, Caesar abolished the lunar system. He introduced the Julian calendar, 365 days, with a leap year every 4 years to account for the solar cycle. To fix the existing mess, he made the year 46 BC, the year of confusion, stretching it to 445 days to pull the seasons back into alignment. He even renamed the month of Quintilis to Julius, our July. It was a move of supreme power. He wasn't just ruling the people, he was ruling time itself. But to the Roman Senate, Caesar was becoming a king, and Rome had hated kings for 500 years. A conspiracy began to form in the shadows, led by men Caesar had pardoned, like Brutus and Cassius. On March 15th, the Ides of March, Caesar walked into a Senate meeting. He had been warned by seers and his own wife to stay home, but his ambition drove him forward. As he took his seat, the conspirators crowded around him. Suddenly, the knives came out. He was stabbed 23 times. He died at the base of a statue of his old rival, Pompey. The conspirators thought that by killing the man, they would save the Republic. They were wrong. Caesar's death didn't bring back democracy. It brought chaos. It ignited another decade of civil war that ended with Caesar's adopted heir, Octavian, becoming Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. Julius Caesar was the bridge between two worlds. He was a ruthless conqueror and a populist reformer. He was a man of the people and a dictator who destroyed their right to choose. He didn't just change Rome, he changed Western civilization. His name became the title for rulers for 2,000 years, from the German Kaiser to the Russian Tsar. So, was he a hero or a villain? Maybe he was simply the only man who understood that the old Roman Republic was already dead, and he was the only one brave enough to build something new in its place. What do you think? Did the Senate save Rome for a few years, or did they just hasten its collapse? Let us know in the comments. And thank you so much for watching this far. If you want to see the first episode of the Titans of History, just go to the channel and click the Napoleon video. If you enjoyed this journey through the life of history's most famous Roman, please subscribe to the channel. It is very appreciated. We'll see you next time.